Clearwater Creek looked almost beautiful at dusk, if you didn't know what had been lost here. The air was crisp, tinged with the first hints of fall, leaves rustling in the cottonwoods that lined the empty road. Grace Whitman paused outside the weathered building that now called itself Last Chance Saloon, keys cold in her palm, gaze lingering over the distant mesa that once cradled her family's ranch. It seemed smaller now, hunched under the weight of twilight, as if even the land knew to brace for disappointment. Inside, the saloon was alive with laughter, cheap music, and the low hum of worry that everyone carried these days. Grace moved behind the bar with practiced ease, her hands remembering the rhythm of pouring, wiping, nodding, tasks that never asked too much or offered too little. No one here talked about what happened after closing. That suited her fine. But on nights like this, when the world outside pressed in too close, memories clawed their way out. She'd once been Clearwater Creek's pride, a horsewoman with a gift, her family's ranch the heart of the community. Now, she worked for tips, counting out dollars that always seemed to fall short, every shift reminding her of the life she'd lost in a divorce as bitter and public as a prairie storm. She let out a slow breath, rubbing the ache from her wrist. The old injury flared up in the cold. A souvenir from the final night at the ranch. Her last attempt to hold on to the horses, the barns, the home. She could still hear her ex-husband's voice, cold and certain, over the judges. She could still see the look on her father's face, proud and broken, as he turned away. Grace learned then what it meant to be truly alone. Outside, the wind rose, scattering dust along Main Street. Grace watched a battered pickup idle outside, then drive off. The new owner of her old land, Charles Redmond, had been making his presence felt more and more. Rumors about Redmond had become warnings, spoken in hushed voices. Don't cross him, don't trust him, keep your head down. He bought up failing properties, cut wages, sued anyone who challenged him, and was rumored to keep a private stable of prize horses for illegal racing. The law never seemed to touch him. Grace hated how the town bowed to him. She hated that she bowed too, keeping quiet, keeping to herself. Her anger simmering beneath the surface. She was closing up when she saw it. A flash of light on the horizon, jagged and unnatural, followed by a deep orange glow. At first, she thought it was the distant lights of Redmond's place, but then she smelled it. Smoke, sharp and wild, carried on the wind. The sky flickered, painting the mesa in molten gold and blood red. Sirens began to wail, piercing the quiet. Then, the horses began to scream. Grace froze, the sound slicing through her like a blade. Instinct took over. She dashed outside, fumbling for her coat, leaving the door swinging wide behind her. The fire on the mesa was moving fast, fueled by weeks of drought. She could see it devouring grass, leaping from cedar to pine. The wind shifted, carrying the flames toward the edge of town, toward barns and paddocks, toward horses she still remembered by name. Her feet pounded against the gravel, adrenaline burning away hesitation. People shouted, trying to herd animals, drag hoses, form bucket lines. Grace ignored them all, drawn by a sound that was more desperate than any siren, the frantic, terrified whinnies of a horse in real danger. Smoke curled around her, stinging her eyes. The fire's heat pressed against her face, fierce and alive. She found the barn at the edge of Redmond's property, its roof glowing with embers. The horses inside were panicked, slamming against the stalls, eyes rolling white with terror. Most had already been let out by ranch hands. But one stall at the far end still held a single, shadowy figure, tall, wild, and rearing against the smoke. A black stallion, muscles bunched and glossy even beneath the soot, fought the halter with a violence that bordered on madness. The ranch hands shouted at her not to go in. She heard their voices, sharp with fear. "Grace, don't! Too dangerous! Leave it!" She ducked past them, breath raw, heart thundering. The fire raced along the rafters. She reached the stall and fumbled with the gate, hands shaking, whispering nonsense to the horse, as if words could calm a creature made of fear and fury. The stallion lashed out, hooves scraping sparks from the floor. "Easy, big guy, come on!" Her fingers worked the latch, skin blistering from the heat. The barn groaned above them, a beam crashing to the floor in a shower of sparks. For a split second, Grace considered retreat, but she saw the stallion's eye, wide and wild, and something inside her broke loose. She yanked the gate open, grabbed the halter, and pulled. The stallion surged forward, nearly knocking her off her feet, but she held on, guiding him through the choking smoke, weaving between burning timbers. The world shrank to the sound of hooves, the slap of fire, the ragged pounding of her heart. They burst from the barn just as the roof collapsed behind them, the explosion of heat flinging Grace and the stallion to the ground. She felt pain, bright, immediate, and then distant. She lay there, lungs heaving, the stallion trembling beside her, his black coat streaked with ash. The world spun, orange and black and utterly silent. For a moment, everything held still. Then the night roared back. Sirens shouting, water hitting fire, the rush of boots. Someone lifted her, voices blurring around her. But all Grace saw was the stallion, standing over her, battered and alive, his sides heaving, eyes fixed on hers. Grace Whitman closed her eyes, soot and tears mixing on her cheeks. For the first time in years, she felt something like hope, fragile and burning, flickering beneath the ashes. Smoke curled around the emergency lights, thick and greasy, painting the world in shades of orange and shadow. Grace coughed, blinking the grit from her eyes as she pulled herself up, battered but alive. The black stallion, soot-stained and wild-eyed, hovered close, muscles trembling, breath coming in short, frantic bursts. Fire crews rushed past, shouting orders, trying to wrangle the blaze before it ate the whole edge of Clearwater Creek. But all Grace saw was the horse, ears flicking at every strange sound, barely under control. A ranch hand tried to grab the stallion's lead. "Let me." Grace yanked it back, shaking her head. "He'll bolt if you rush him. Just give me a second." The stallion shivered violently, nearly dragging her off her feet. Grace felt pain everywhere. Her palms were blistered, her lungs ached, and her cheek stung from where the burning beam had grazed her. But none of that mattered. Right now, it was just her and this horse, cut off from the world by a haze of smoke and panic. Sirens blared as another fire truck arrived, headlights slashing through the chaos. "Everyone clear back!" a firefighter shouted, shoving people away from the barn's collapsing skeleton. Sparks flew as another section of roof caved in, throwing embers into the dry night air. The stallion reared again, hooves slicing at nothing, and Grace nearly lost her grip. She pressed her face to his shoulder, her voice low and steady. "Hey, easy. It's over now. We made it out. Just breathe with me." The horse's sides quivered, sweat cutting channels through the ash on his coat. For a moment, Grace thought he might break, might crash off into the burning dark. But slowly, the stallion's panic bled out, leaving behind a wary, exhausted stillness. She led him away from the ruined barn, boots crunching through charred debris. The town's volunteer fire chief, an old friend, met her halfway. "Grace, you okay? You're bleeding." "I'm fine. I need to get him somewhere safe." The chief nodded, but his eyes kept darting to the stallion. "That's Redmond's new one, right? The one he brought in from out west?" Grace shrugged, unwilling to explain the twist of guilt in her gut. She'd seen Redmond's trailers rolling in last month, heard the talk about a champion black stallion. No one knew where the horse came from, only that Redmond claimed he was untouchable, unbeatable. Rumor was he bought the horse for reasons no one dared to question. The chief looked uneasy. "You sure you want to tangle with Redmond over this?" Grace glanced back at the flames, swallowing the taste of fear. "I didn't do this for Redmond. I did it for the horse." She guided the stallion toward the edge of the lot, where the ground sloped toward the creek. The wind shifted, carrying the fire away for now, but the threat wasn't gone. Sparks rained down, lighting patches of dry grass. She heard shouts in the distance. Someone had lost their herd. Someone else was calling for a missing child. The whole town felt ready to shatter. Grace stumbled, knees weak. The stallion pressed against her, solid and grounding, as if to remind her she wasn't done yet. She could see blood on his flank, a jagged cut from the scramble through the barn. His breathing was ragged, his eyes rolling, but he stayed beside her, matching her pace step for trembling step. They reached the edge of the fire line, where paramedics checked on the injured. One tried to steer her toward an ambulance, but Grace waved him off. "I'm fine, but this horse needs help. He's cut up and burned, and he's in shock." The paramedics stared, unsure what to do with a woman and a horse at the edge of disaster. The town's vet, Dr. Samuel Briggs, finally arrived, his old truck rattling to a stop in the glow of firelight. "Grace, what on earth?" His eyes widened as he took in the stallion's condition. "Get him into my trailer, fast. I'll clear space at the clinic." Grace hesitated, glancing at the flames. The path back to the road was narrow, blocked by hoses and emergency vehicles. The stallion's breathing turned ragged again, hooves stamping restlessly. The panic threatened to return. Grace took a risk, dropping the lead rope and stepping in front of the horse, her own body blocking his escape. "Hey, listen to me, you're not alone anymore. I've got you, okay?" Her voice shook, but she held the horse's gaze, refusing to back down. The stallion's ears flicked, then lowered. He followed her, slowly, hesitantly, toward Dr. Briggs's trailer. Someone shouted, "Redmond's gonna be pissed when he hears about this." Grace ignored it. Redmond could take his threats and burn with the rest of the night. Right now, only this horse mattered. Inside the trailer, the stallion shuddered, refusing to settle. Grace stroked his neck, whispering whatever came to mind. Fragments of lullabies from her childhood, old training commands, prayers she hadn't uttered in years. Outside, firefighters battled the blaze. The world contracted to the rhythm of her hand and the horse's labored breathing. As the trailer door slammed shut, Grace felt her strength give out. She collapsed onto a bale of hay, tears stinging her eyes, unable to tell if she was weeping from pain or relief. The stallion watched her, nostrils flaring, every muscle tense as a drawn wire. "We made it. We made it out." Her voice cracked. The exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She thought about everything she'd lost, everything this horse might still lose. But for one fragile moment, in the heart of the chaos, Grace allowed herself to hope. Dawn crept over the mesa, pale and uncertain. Dr. Briggs's truck rumbled down the empty road toward the clinic. Grace slumped beside the battered stallion, both of them marked by fire and ash. Behind them, Clearwater Creek smoldered, homes damaged, lives upended, but not yet beaten. Grace closed her eyes, one hand buried in the black stallion's mane. "I won't let them take you," she whispered, and somewhere deep inside, the horse seemed to understand. The sun rose, gilding the ruins, as Grace and the stallion, soot-stained and trembling, rolled into the uncertain promise of a new day. The veterinary clinic on the outskirts of Clearwater Creek always smelled faintly of iodine, hay, and worry. Grace staggered inside with the stallion as dawn lit the horizon, turning the smoke-stained sky the color of faded pennies. Her boots left muddy prints on the tiled floor. Dr. Samuel Briggs was already donning gloves, his voice clipped and brisk. "Get him into the stall." "Dr. Marchant," Briggs gestured, barely glancing at Grace's bleeding hands. His eyes were on the black stallion, assessing every step, every shudder. The animal hesitated at the door, nostrils flaring, eyes rolling with the memory of fire. Grace moved slowly, murmuring nonsense, coaxing him inside. Her muscles screamed with every motion, but she held steady, unwilling to let go now that they'd come so far. Dr. Briggs clicked on the overhead lights, bathing the space in harsh white. Blood streaked the stallion's flank, and patches of hair had been singed down to the skin. As the vet ran his hands along the animal's sides, the stallion flinched at every touch, shivering with exhaustion and pain. Grace held his head, stroking the sweat-damp mane. "Let's get a look at those burns," Briggs muttered. He drew in a sharp breath as he peeled back a charred patch of skin. "Some of these are deep. Grace, he's in bad shape." "I know. But he made it out. That's got to count for something." Briggs cleaned the wounds, his movements careful but unflinching. He examined the horse's breathing, his pulse, then ran a hand gently over the jagged cut on his flank. "He's got a shot at recovery, but it won't be easy. He's in shock, and infection is a real threat. This kind of trauma—" He hesitated, then looked at Grace, voice heavy. "Honestly, the most merciful thing might be to put him down." Grace stiffened. "No. Not after everything he's survived. He wants to live, Sam. I saw it in his eyes." Her own voice trembled, but she wouldn't back down. Briggs sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I figured you'd say that. You always were stubborn." He gave her a sideways look, not unkind. "All right, but you're taking responsibility. He'll need round-the-clock care. And even then, I'll stay with him." Grace pressed her palm to the stallion's warm neck. "I'll do whatever it takes." They worked through the morning, bandaging wounds, flushing burns, coaxing the horse to drink. Grace barely noticed when the front door chimed, and a small figure stepped inside, clutching a battered backpack. It was Maggie Harper, a local girl with a shock of unruly brown hair and eyes too big for her face. She hovered at the doorway, chewing her lip, watching Grace with silent curiosity. "Is he gonna be okay?" Maggie's voice was soft but determined. Grace glanced up, surprised by the concern in the girl's eyes. "We're trying our best. He's tough, but he's hurting." She managed a tired smile. "What are you doing here this early, Maggie?" Maggie shrugged, ducking her head. "Saw the fire. Dad says it was the worst one since '92. He sent me to check on our old dog, but I wanted to see the horse." She edged closer, her gaze never leaving the black stallion. Dr. Briggs frowned, but Grace nodded. "You can help if you want. He needs calm voices and gentle hands right now." Maggie's face lit up. She reached out slowly, letting the horse sniff her palm. To Grace's amazement, the stallion stilled, nostrils twitching. Maggie smiled, eyes shining with the thrill of being trusted. "What's his name?" Grace hesitated, realizing she didn't know. She studied the stallion, the way his coat caught the light beneath the grime, the stubborn lift of his head, the wounded dignity in his eyes. "Onyx," she said, the name coming to her in a rush. "His coat's like black stone, tough as anything." "He earned it." Maggie repeated the name softly. "Onyx. That's perfect." As the hours slipped by, the three of them worked together, Dr. Briggs handling the worst of the wounds, Grace and Maggie cleaning, soothing, holding. The stallion's breathing slowed, his eyes losing some of their wildness. For a while it felt like hope might stick. But outside the clinic, the town was already talking. Word traveled fast in Clearwater Creek. Some said Grace was reckless, risking her life for a horse that wasn't hers. Others muttered about Redmond, wondering what he'd do when he heard his prized stallion had been rescued, by Grace Whitman, of all people. A few wondered aloud if the fire was an accident at all. Inside the break room, Dr. Briggs poured black coffee for Grace. "You know this isn't going to be easy. Redmond's not the forgiving type. He'll come knocking, legal papers in hand." Grace's jaw tightened. "Let him. I didn't rescue Onyx for Redmond. The horse deserves a chance, no matter who claims to own him." Her words were firm, but worry gnawed at her gut. Maggie overheard, eyes wide. "Redmond's a bully. Everyone knows it." She hugged her backpack tighter. "But people listen to him. They're scared. You're not scared, are you?" Grace paused, looking at the girl's earnest face. "I am," she admitted, her voice low. "But sometimes you have to do the right thing anyway." That evening, as the sun set behind the ruined barn, Onyx finally ate from Grace's hand. Maggie sat nearby, humming quietly, a rare peace settling over the stall. For a moment, Grace let herself imagine a future, one where scars could heal and broken things could be made whole. But in the growing darkness, whispers flickered like the last embers of the fire. Doubt crept in, curling around Grace's heart. The battle for Onyx was only just beginning, and the town's silence felt heavy with warning. Yet in the quiet, with Maggie's laughter echoing in the corridor and Onyx resting his heavy head against her arm, Grace found something she hadn't felt in years, a fragile, stubborn hope. The days that followed blurred into a steady rhythm of care, exhaustion, and wary hope. Each morning, Grace arrived at the clinic just after sunrise, the dew still sparkling on the grass outside, and the world painted a soft, blue-gray. Maggie was always waiting on the porch, backpack in hand, hair tangled from restless sleep. Together, they stepped into the quiet barn where Onyx waited, the air thick with the scents of antiseptic, hay, and horse sweat. Onyx's wounds were slow to heal. The burns along his side scabbed over, raw and angry, while the deep gash on his flank oozed whenever he moved too quickly. Dr. Briggs monitored the stallion's progress with the seriousness of a battlefield medic, rarely showing hope or despair, only resolve. He taught Maggie how to clean the burns, how to mix ointments, how to speak gently so the stallion wouldn't spook. Maggie listened as if these were secrets of the universe. Grace saw herself in the horse's wary eyes, the way he flinched from sudden movements, the way his ears flicked anxiously at every new sound. She knew too well what it meant to be haunted by memories that wouldn't settle. Nights were the hardest. She'd lie in her tiny rental cottage, the ceiling creaking with the weight of old regrets, and dream of the ranch she'd lost, the wide pastures, the sound of her father's laughter, the warm press of a horse's muzzle in her hand. Some nights she'd wake to the smell of smoke, heart pounding as if the fire still chased her. Sometimes Grace found herself talking to Onyx when no one else was around, her voice low and rough. "I know what it's like, to feel trapped, to want to run but not know where to go." She stroked his neck, feeling the shiver in his skin. "But you made it out." "We both did." One morning, as she was changing Onyx's bandages, she noticed Maggie's hands shaking. "You okay, kiddo?" Maggie bit her lip, glancing away. "It's just, Dad's been yelling a lot lately. Says I shouldn't be spending so much time here. Says people are talking." Grace knelt beside her, careful not to touch. "You don't have to stay if it's causing trouble at home." "I want to." Maggie's voice was fierce, her eyes bright with something almost desperate. "It's quiet here. He doesn't yell when I'm gone. And Onyx, he likes me. I can tell." Grace nodded, recognizing a loneliness in the girl that mirrored her own. "You're always welcome here. Just promise you'll be safe, all right?" Maggie managed a small smile, then turned back to Onyx, her hand gentle on his muzzle. As Onyx grew stronger, so did the whispers. Grace heard them in the grocery store, saw the way neighbors glanced away when she walked by. Some said she was meddling in things that didn't concern her. Others wondered if she was trying to get back at Redmond, as if saving a life could be anything but an act of mercy. Every day she felt the weight of their doubt pressing closer, but she pressed on, refusing to let the town's fear infect her resolve. One afternoon, Dr. Briggs approached her in the quiet of the feed room, his brow furrowed. "You know Redmond's been asking around, wants to know what's happening with his horse. He's got his lawyer sniffing around too." Grace's jaw tightened. "Onyx isn't ready to be moved. He might never be ready. He's traumatized." Briggs hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Be careful, Grace. Redmond's got deep pockets and a long memory. I don't want you or that girl caught in the crossfire." Grace managed a wry smile. "I'm not afraid of Redmond. He's not the first bully I've faced." The vet nodded, but worry lingered in his eyes. He handed her a jar of ointment, the label worn and faded. "Keep fighting for him. Not many would." As evening fell, Grace walked Maggie home. The sun burned low, gilding the mesa in gold and fire. They passed empty fields and battered barns, the scars of the wildfire still visible, blackened fence posts, scorched grass, the smell of ash forever clinging to the air. "Do you miss your old ranch?" Maggie asked suddenly, kicking at a pebble. Grace looked up at the fading light, her breath catching. "Every day. But I can't go back, so I go forward. That's all any of us can do." They walked in silence, the hush between them comfortable. When they reached Maggie's house, the girl hesitated on the porch. "Thanks, Grace, for letting me help. You helped more than you know." "Good night, Maggie." Grace watched her go inside, the door closing quietly behind her. She wondered how much more the girl was hiding, bruises that didn't show, fears she never spoke aloud. The world was full of shadows, but tonight at least, she'd given Maggie a little light. That night, Grace returned to the clinic, unable to sleep. Onyx whickered softly as she entered, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. She sat beside him, one hand buried in his mane, her thoughts drifting between past and present. Outside, a pickup rumbled past on the road, headlights sweeping across the clinic windows. Grace tensed, but the truck moved on, leaving only the whisper of tires on gravel. She closed her eyes, letting the horse's steady breathing calm her. In the quiet, she heard voices from the hallway. Briggs and one of his assistants, talking low. "Redmond's been calling again. Wants to see the horse tomorrow." Grace's heart thudded. She knew trouble was coming, that the fragile peace she'd built couldn't last. But as she stroked Onyx's warm neck, she made a silent promise. To the horse, to Maggie, to herself. "We'll face whatever comes. Together." As the night deepened, Grace let herself believe that, for now, hope was enough. The next morning, Clearwater Creek felt different. The usual sleepy calm was replaced by a tension so thick you could feel it on your skin, like humidity before a storm. Grace woke from a shallow sleep, dreams of fire and running horses still flickering in her mind, and dressed in silence. When she arrived at the clinic, Maggie was already there, hunched on the back steps, eyes rimmed red. Before Grace could ask, Dr. Briggs stuck his head out the side door, his face tight with worry. "He's here. With company." Parked out front was a brand-new black pickup, flanked by two muscle-bound men in crisp button-downs. The men didn't bother hiding their guns, one on a hip, the other beneath a jacket. Between them, Charles Redmond stood with the careless confidence of someone who believed he owned the world. He wore a pearl-snap shirt, pressed jeans, and a belt buckle big enough to flash in the morning sun. In one hand, he held a thick manila envelope. Grace squared her shoulders and walked up to meet them. Maggie trailed behind, hands stuffed deep in her hoodie pockets, chin tucked to her chest. Redmond barely spared them a glance. His gaze swept the building, the truck, the old oak shading the lot. He didn't even flinch at the smell of antiseptic or the distant whinny of Onyx in the barn. "Ms. Whitman," he said, voice low and oily, "you've got something that belongs to me." Grace crossed her arms. "He almost died in that fire. If we hadn't gotten him out, he'd be dead now." Redmond smiled, thin and sharp. "And I appreciate your heroics. But let's not confuse gratitude with ownership." He handed her the envelope. "Legal paperwork. That horse is mine. I have receipts, transport documents, registration. Unless you want to go to court, you'll turn him over." One of the men stepped forward, eyes hard, hand resting on his belt. Maggie inched closer to Grace. Dr. Briggs joined them, jaw clenched. "I can't release him." "Dr. D. Briggs said, keeping his voice calm. "He's under veterinary care for severe burns and trauma. Moving him could kill him." Redmond's smile faded. "Then I'll get a second opinion, or a court order. My lawyer will be in touch by the end of the day." He turned to go, but paused, looking Grace dead in the eye. "Let me give you some advice. You don't want to make an enemy of me. People who cross me, they regret it." As his men followed him back to the truck, Grace felt a shiver chase up her spine. The sound of his words lingered, dark and heavy. The pickup rumbled out of the lot, tires spitting gravel. Inside, Maggie let out a shaky breath. "He can't take Onyx, right? You saved him. Doesn't that count for something?" Grace knelt to look her in the eye. "I don't know, Maggie, but I'm not giving up." That day, the rumors exploded. Redmond's social media posts spread like wildfire. Grace had stolen his prized horse. She was endangering the animal, defying a legal owner, disrespecting the town's biggest employer. Within hours, people picked sides. Some left nasty comments. Others, afraid of Redmond's reach, kept quiet. Grace felt the shift everywhere she went. At the grocery store, the clerk couldn't meet her eyes. At the gas station, neighbors who'd once waved now hurried away. She saw people talking behind their hands, whispering at church, at school drop-off, in the diner. It felt like a second exile, one that reached beyond her and into the small community she'd tried so hard to belong to. At the clinic, Maggie did her best to distract Onyx, brushing his coat, humming while she worked. But the tension seeped in, making the horse skittish. Grace tried to focus on bandages and feeding, but every noise outside made her heart jump. That afternoon, a thick envelope slid under the clinic's front door. An official cease and desist letter from Redmond's lawyer. Dr. Beauchamp. Briggs read it out loud in the break room, his voice shaking with anger. "He's threatening to sue me, too," the vet said, waving the paper. "Claims I'm conspiring to withhold property. What kind of man does this over a horse?" Grace stared at the letter, then at Maggie, who was biting her lip so hard it nearly bled. "He's trying to scare us. We're not giving in." But the weight of Redmond's power grew by the hour. Calls to the clinic slowed. Longtime clients canceled appointments. Maggie's father, already on edge, forbade her from going to the clinic at all. "I'm sorry, honey, but Redmond's trouble. If you help Grace, you're done here." Maggie pleaded, but her father wouldn't budge. "He owns the land under this town. We can't afford to cross him." Still, Maggie found ways to sneak out, slipping from her window at night, walking the dark road to the clinic. She brought Grace coffee and sandwiches, her presence a comfort against the growing sense of siege. One night, as they sat in the quiet stall with Onyx, Maggie whispered, "Why do people let him get away with it? Why don't the adults do something?" Grace shook her head, anger burning low in her chest. "Fear, mostly. Redmond's got money, lawyers, connections. People are afraid of losing what little they have." Onyx rested his heavy head in Maggie's lap. The girl stroked his nose, voice trembling. "It isn't fair. He's just a bully." "Yes," Grace said. "But sometimes bullies win, until somebody stands up to them." Through it all, Onyx slowly began to heal. His wounds crusted over. His steps grew surer. He watched Grace and Maggie with wary trust, his once wild eyes now shining with something softer. But as Grace sat alone after Maggie left, she realized the fight for Onyx was no longer just about a horse. It was about standing up to the darkness that had crept into Clearwater Creek, refusing to bow. Even if it meant standing alone. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the clinic windows. Grace looked at the stallion, then at the empty night. "We're not done yet," she whispered, her resolve settling like stone. Clearwater Creek was a town built on old secrets, but Grace never expected one of them would come to live in her hands. The week after Redmond's threats was a haze of tension. Every knock at the door made her jump. The clinic's phone rang only with wrong numbers or heavy, silent breaths that no one would claim. Maggie kept sneaking out, stubborn as ever, whispering jokes to Onyx in the dead of night, trying to keep the shadows at bay. It was during one of those late-night check-ins that Grace found the clue that changed everything. She was brushing Onyx's flank, moving slow so she wouldn't startle him, when her fingers caught on a patch of rough skin beneath the ash-black hair. She frowned, parting the coat with gentle hands. At first, it looked like nothing, just an old scar, nearly hidden. But in the harsh white of her flashlight, the shape became clear, a faint, scarred overbrand, its edges blurred by time but still unmistakable. Not Redmond's mark. Not any local ranches either. Her heart hammered. Grace traced the brand with her thumb, mind racing. This wasn't just a rescue horse. This was a missing horse. Dr. Briggs entered, half awake and grouchy, but when Grace showed him the brand, he sobered in an instant. "That's not Redmond's," he muttered. "Hell, I haven't seen that mark in years. Give me a minute." He disappeared into the office, rummaging through old files, emerging with a battered book of brands from neighboring states. Maggie hovered at the stall door, curiosity bright in her eyes. "Is it important?" "Maybe more than we know," Grace replied, not taking her eyes off the stallion. Dr. Briggs flipped through the registry until he stopped, finger jabbing a yellowed page. "Here it is. Wilson Ranch. Over in New Mexico. They lost a stallion a year ago. Police thought it was horse theft, but nothing was ever found." He glanced at Grace, the pieces falling into place. "If this is their horse, Redmond's got bigger problems than a civil suit." The air in the clinic shifted, a new urgency buzzing between them. Briggs, cautious by nature, urged Grace to be discreet. "Don't tell anyone, not yet. Redmond's the kind who doesn't let things go easy." That night, Grace barely slept. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, running every possibility through her mind. Was Redmond a thief? Or had he bought a stolen horse without caring about the truth? The more she thought, the more the old fear mixed with something sharper, determination. By morning, she'd made a decision. She called the only man in town who might know what to do. Bill Turner, retired sheriff. Bill was a wiry old man with a reputation for honesty and a memory like a steel trap. He showed up within the hour, coffee mug in hand, listening as Grace explained everything. Bill examined the brand, his face hardening. "That's a Wilson mark, all right. I did a bit of work on that case last year before I retired. David Wilson, single dad, lost half his herd to thieves. The stallion was his pride, disappeared in the dead of night. They never found a trace." Grace's pulse quickened. "You think Redmond's involved?" Bill's eyes narrowed. "Redmond's got his fingers in a lot of pies, but he's careful. Doesn't do the dirty work himself. But this," he tapped the brand, voice dropping. "This could bring in the feds. Horse theft across state lines is a felony, and if Redmond knows this isn't his horse, well, that's conspiracy." The old sheriff made a call from the clinic's landline. Within an hour, a dark SUV with government plates pulled up. Out stepped Lucas Rivera, a federal agent with sharp eyes and the patient manner of a man who'd seen too much. He listened to Bill's summary, then questioned Grace and Dr. Briggs, taking notes, asking for every detail, how the horse was found, how Redmond reacted, everything. Rivera turned the conversation serious. "You can't tell anyone about this," he said quietly. "If Redmond suspects you know, he could get desperate. Let us handle it from here." But Grace shook her head. "Onyx isn't evidence. He's a living, breathing animal. I won't let anyone move him until he's strong enough." Rivera's face softened just a little. "We'll work with you, but you need to be careful. Redmond's been under investigation before. He's dangerous. If you see anything, hear anything strange, call me." He handed her his card, then left, tires crunching on gravel, promise of trouble in his wake. That afternoon, Grace felt the eyes of the town on her more than ever. She could feel the invisible threads of gossip winding around her. But Maggie was undeterred. She sat with Onyx, reading him stories from an old book. her voice a steady anchor in the growing storm. Grace and Bill dug deeper, searching news archives, checking missing horse reports. Sure enough, Onyx matched the description from the Wilson ranch, right down to a small white scar on his fetlock, barely visible beneath his soot-stained coat. The discovery brought a surge of hope, but it also tightened the net. Redmond's men began hanging around the edge of the clinic property, watching. Grace received an anonymous note, blocky letters spelling out a threat. "Leave it alone or else." She took the note to Lucas Rivera, who nodded grimly. "This is how he works. He scares people into silence, but he slipped up now. We're close." Lucas warned her not to trust anyone. "There's more at stake than you know. If he feels threatened, he'll fight dirty. Stay vigilant. I'll have agents nearby, but don't do anything risky on your own." That night, Grace checked the locks 3 times. She sat beside Onyx, listening to his breathing, trying to convince herself she wasn't in over her head. But Maggie's faith, the old sheriff's loyalty, and the agent's quiet confidence all buoyed her. For the first time since the fire, she felt less alone. In the darkness, as the wind rattled the windows and the stallion snorted softly beside her, Grace made a vow. Whatever it took, she would see this through. She owed Onyx, she owed herself, the truth. The tension in Clearwater Creek thickened like storm clouds, making every step feel heavy and uncertain. Grace noticed it in the way her phone rang late at night, and no one answered, in the way Redmond's men parked just a little too long near the clinic, their windows blacked out, faces turned away. Dr. Briggs double-checked every lock, and even Bill Turner started coming by in the evenings, his old revolver visible at his hip. No one said the word danger out loud, but everyone felt it in their bones. Redmond's legal threats escalated. A new letter arrived each day. One threatened criminal charges for theft. Another accused Grace of interfering with an official investigation. And still another hinted at slander and damages in excess of $100,000. Dr. Briggs received a visit from the county health inspector, tipped off about supposed unsanitary conditions at the clinic. Grace found her car keyed in the parking lot, the word thief scratched into the paint. Maggie's world shrank too. Her father, already stretched thin by work and drink, forbid her from going to the clinic. "He's not going to help you anymore, Maggie, and neither am I. That woman's going to get you in trouble." Maggie pressed her lips together and said nothing. But that night, she packed a duffel bag with snacks and a flashlight, then slipped out her window, running the dark road to the clinic. She ducked behind the old water tower when she saw headlights, heart pounding, but she made it. Grace found her curled up on a hay bale in the early hours, her cheeks streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," Maggie whispered. "I just couldn't leave Onyx." Grace wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "You're safe here. You always will be." But even Grace was beginning to doubt her own promise. Redmond's reach was growing longer, and her allies were few. She spent nights awake, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible outcome, most of them bad. The only thing that gave her courage was the way Onyx's eyes met hers in the darkness. Steady, trusting, asking her not to give up. Lucas Rivera, the federal agent, visited under cover of night. He sat at the kitchen table with Grace, his voice low. "We're almost there. The evidence is building. The Wilson family confirmed their stallion's disappearance, and we have reason to believe Redmond's men are linked to other thefts. But we need Redmond to make a move. Something we can catch him on, no question." "He already has," Grace muttered, showing Lucas the latest threatening note. What more do you need? Lucas frowned. He's careful. His hands stay clean. If we move too soon, he'll slip away. I promise you, Grace, I'm watching him, but I need you to hold on. Grace nodded, but her patience was wearing thin. Fear and frustration gnawed at her, especially when she thought about Maggie. One evening, Maggie didn't show up. Grace checked her phone. No message, no missed calls. She paced the clinic, nerves fraying. Finally, she grabbed her keys and drove to Maggie's house. She parked across the street, watched for a minute, then knocked quietly at the back door. The house was dark, except for a flickering TV in the living room. Maggie's father answered, eyes bloodshot, voice rough. She's not here, and you're not welcome. I just want to make sure she's okay. She's fine. She needs to stop running around with you is what she needs. Grace caught a glimpse of Maggie in the hallway, her face pale, eyes pleading. Her father yanked the door shut, locking it with a harsh click. Grace pressed her palm to the cold wood, fighting the urge to yell, to break in, to do something, anything. That night, Maggie showed up at the clinic with a split lip and a stubborn tilt to her chin. I'm not leaving. Not until Onyx is safe. Grace took her inside, cleaned her wound, and let her curl up in the tack room. As she watched Maggie drift to sleep, Grace's resolve hardened. She'd fought for her ranch and lost, but she wouldn't lose this. Not to Redmond, not to fear, not to silence. Onyx seemed to sense the shift. He nickered softly whenever Grace entered the stall, pressed his forehead to Maggie's shoulder, stood guard while she slept. He was healing, the burns shrinking to scars, his spirit slowly returning. Late one night, Lucas confided in Grace as they walked the perimeter of the clinic. I grew up on a ranch like yours, he admitted. I know what it means to lose something you love. Redmond's run roughshod over too many good people, but he makes mistakes when he gets desperate. Grace looked out at the shadows flickering beyond the fence. I'm tired of being afraid. I want this to end. Lucas gave her a sad smile. It will. Just hold your ground a little longer. I'll have backup close by if things turn violent. As the week drew to a close, Redmond's tactics grew bolder. A rock shattered the clinic's front window. Someone spray-painted horse thief on the barn doors. The town's support faded, but Maggie never wavered. She cleaned stalls, carried water, talked to Onyx for hours. If she was scared, she never showed it. One afternoon, while tending Onyx's bandages, Maggie looked up at Grace, her voice quiet. Are you ever sorry? For fighting? For all this trouble? Grace shook her head. No, not for 1 second. I'd do it again. You fight for what's right, even if you have to stand alone. Maggie nodded, tears shining in her eyes. I want to be brave like you. Grace squeezed her hand. You already are. As darkness fell over Clearwater Creek, Grace, Maggie, and Onyx formed a fragile circle of defiance, daring the night to break them. Redmond might have money, power, and fear on his side, but Grace had something better. Loyalty, courage, and the stubborn hope that this time, justice would not be denied. And in that moment, as the wind howled and the town held its breath, Grace knew she was ready for whatever came next. The morning sky broke cold and clear, a welcome change after nights choked with smoke and dread. Grace paced the front of the clinic, boots scuffing against the gravel, her nerves stretched thin. Today would be different. Today they would stop running and force Redmond's hand. The plan Lucas and Bill had put together was risky, but it was their best shot. A single chance to bring the truth out from behind whispers and shadows. It started with a simple announcement. Dr. Briggs's clinic would be hosting a public event, inviting the whole town to witness the reunion between the Black Stallion and his rightful owner, David Wilson, who was driving in from New Mexico. The story spread quickly. Some townsfolk were suspicious, some curious, a few even hopeful. Redmond, hearing the news, went silent for a day, then made his own move, calling in favors, sending his lawyer to demand a private meeting, posting cryptic threats online. Inside the clinic, Maggie straightened her best shirt and combed her hair. Her split lip had faded to a thin scab, and her eyes burned with determination. Grace hugged her. "You ready for this?" Maggie nodded. "Onyx is too. He's not afraid of Redmond anymore." Bill Turner arrived early, parking his battered Ford at the far edge of the lot, keeping his old badge clipped to his belt. Lucas Rivera, dressed like just another ranch hand in jeans and boots, kept to the background, earpiece hidden beneath his ball cap, phone never far from his hand. He'd brought backup. A pair of agents waiting in a borrowed pickup across the street, eyes sharp, ready for whatever trouble might come. By mid-afternoon, a nervous crowd gathered outside the clinic. Redmond's men showed up first, spreading out along the fence, arms folded, faces like stone. Redmond himself arrived in a gleaming truck, flanked by his lawyer and two new heavies, their intentions written in the set of their jaws. David Wilson was last to arrive, stepping out of an old van with his young son, holding a faded photograph of his lost stallion. He looked tired, but grateful, and when he saw Onyx, freshly groomed, coat shining even with the scars, his face crumpled in relief. The townspeople formed a wary half-circle, some whispering, some pretending not to care. Tension vibrated through the air, everyone waiting for someone else to make the first move. Grace stood at the center, Maggie at her side, Onyx calm and regal behind the stall gate. Bill Turner addressed the crowd, voice steady. "We're here to set things right. This horse, branded and stolen, belongs to David Wilson. The law says so and the evidence is clear." Redmond scoffed, stepping forward. "Evidence? I have bills of sale, transport papers, a vet's certification. That horse is mine. All this," he gestured at the crowd, at Grace, at Wilson, "is a farce, and anyone standing in my way will regret it." Lucas stepped forward, flashing his badge for the first time. "Mr. Redmond, we have reason to believe you're involved in a multi-state horse theft ring. Any interference here today will be considered obstruction of justice." The crowd rippled, eyes wide, voices rising in surprise. Redmond's men stiffened, glancing at each other. His lawyer hissed something in his ear, but Redmond only grew bolder, his face mottled with rage. "I don't care who you are," Redmond shouted. "No one takes what's mine." He lunged toward the stall gate, shoving Grace aside. For a split second, chaos reigned. Shouts, people surging back, Onyx rearing in alarm. Redmond tried to force open the gate, but Onyx planted himself between Redmond and Grace, muscles coiled, head tossed high. The horse let out a shrill, furious scream, wild and warning. Redmond's men moved in, trying to corral the horse, but Lucas and his agents were quicker, stepping in, drawing weapons, holding the line. Maggie, heart-pounding, slipped between bodies and reached for Onyx's halter, whispering softly, "Easy, boy. I'm here. It's all right." Onyx quieted, snorting and stamping, but didn't bolt. Bill Turner produced a folder of documents, photos of the brand, reports from the Wilson Ranch, sworn statements from witnesses who'd seen Redmond's men loading horses in the dead of night. He read aloud, his voice never shaking. The truth could no longer be hidden. Redmond, cornered, made a desperate move. He grabbed a can of gasoline from his truck, splashing it against the clinic's wooden walls. "You think you can take me down? You'll have to burn it all to the ground." He fumbled for a lighter, hands trembling. Screams echoed as the crowd scattered, and Lucas lunged, tackling Redmond before the flame could catch. One of Redmond's men swung a fist at Bill Turner, knocking him to the ground, but was tackled by another agent. The chaos surged, people yelling, children crying, Onyx kicking the stall gate in terror. Through it all, Grace and Maggie stayed with Onyx, refusing to leave him. Redmond fought like a man possessed, but Lucas and his agents finally subdued him, slapping handcuffs on his wrists as the crowd stared, breathless. The lighter clattered across the gravel, harmless now. David Wilson, voice thick, called out, "That's my horse. Please, let him come home." Grace nodded, tears stinging her eyes, and led Onyx from the stall. The stallion stepped into the sun, head high, scars shining in the light. The crowd parted, whispers of awe and relief chasing after them. As police backup and the FBI arrived, rounding up Redmond's men, the townspeople slowly drew closer, shame and relief mingling in their faces. Maggie clung to Grace's hand, her eyes full of wonder. "I knew you'd keep him safe," she whispered. "You always do." Grace looked around, at the battered clinic, at the crowd now daring to cheer, at Lucas shaking Bill's hand, at Wilson hugging his son and his horse. She realized something powerful had shifted. Fear no longer ruled this town. For the first time, hope had stepped into the daylight, and for the first time in years, Grace let herself believe they could build something new out of the ashes. The chaos outside the clinic had barely settled when the smell of gasoline lingered in the air, sharp and raw. Sirens wailed in the distance as police cars and the FBI convoy rolled into Clearwater Creek, red and blue lights slicing across the battered crowd. Grace's knees trembled, her heart thudding as she watched agents pull Redmond's men away in handcuffs. For a moment, all she could hear was her own ragged breath and the panicked snorts of Onyx, who still refused to let anyone but Grace or Maggie near him. Lucas Rivera stood tall by the clinic door, issuing orders into his radio, his eyes never leaving Redmond. The rancher, cuffed and furious, spat curses as he was led to the back of a waiting patrol car. The crowd parted to let the authorities through, some folks staring in disbelief, others blinking back tears or looking away in shame. Maggie stayed close to Grace, her small hand gripping tightly. "It's over, right? He can't hurt us anymore?" Grace squeezed her hand, offering a tired smile. "It's over for Redmond. For us, it's just beginning." But the day's danger wasn't done. In the confusion, one of Redmond's loyal men, a wiry ex-con everyone called Stick, broke free, vanishing behind the clinic. Bill Turner noticed first, cursing under his breath and running after him. Lucas shouted for backup, but in the panic, no one saw Stick double back with a can of gasoline, slipping into the shadows near the barn. Inside the clinic, Grace tended to Onyx's scraped leg, trying to soothe the horse's nerves. David Wilson stood nearby, emotion raw on his face as he stroked the stallion's neck. "I never thought I'd see him again," he said, voice thick. "I can't thank you enough." A sudden commotion erupted outside. Maggie's face blanched as she spotted smoke curling from the side of the clinic. The old storage room was on fire, Stick's final desperate act. The flames licked up the dry wooden siding, and for a split second, fear froze the crowd. Grace reacted first, yelling for help. Get the animals out! Dr. Briggs and his techs rushed to open the side doors and herd the dogs, cats, and smaller horses into the parking lot. Stick, cornered near the fire, pulled a knife and shouted, "Nobody's taking nothing from Redmond! This place burns!" The crowd shrank back. It was Maggie who broke through the fear. She stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. "No, you can't. These animals didn't do anything to you. You want to be loyal to Redmond? He wouldn't lift a finger for you. Let them go. Let all of us go." Her words rang out, sharp as any siren, echoing off the walls of the clinic and striking a nerve in the gathered townsfolk. For the first time, the people of Clearwater Creek stepped forward. Bill Turner flanked Stick from behind, and Lucas signaled his agents, who closed in quickly. But it was the town's sudden courage, their refusal to let one man's rage ruin what little hope they had left, that gave them strength. Stick swung his knife at Bill, catching his sleeve, but Bill tackled him hard, pinning him to the ground until the agents pulled him away. Dr. Briggs and 2 ranchers used fire extinguishers to smother the flames before they reached the barn. For a moment, it seemed the whole town held its breath, watching as Maggie dropped to her knees beside a rescued dog, sobbing with relief. As the smoke cleared, Grace stood with Onyx in the parking lot, surrounded by neighbors, some apologizing, others just silently grateful. David Wilson hugged his son tightly, both weeping as they stroked Onyx's mane. Lucas approached Grace, a rare smile creasing his face. "You did it. You all did. I've never seen a town turn like that. Maybe now people will remember how to stand up for each other." Bill dusted off his jacket, his old eyes twinkling. "About time, if you ask me." The agents loaded Redmond, Stick, and the rest of the gang into their vehicles. As the last car pulled away, a hush fell over the lot. Grace caught the eye of the mayor, who had watched everything in stunned silence. He nodded to her, a gesture of respect she hadn't seen in years. In the quiet that followed, Maggie addressed the crowd, her voice still shaking but growing stronger. "We all knew what was going on. We were just too scared to say anything. But look at what we did when we stood together. Onyx isn't just a horse. He's hope. He's what happens when we stop being afraid." People murmured in agreement, and for the first time applause broke out, tentative, then swelling as everyone joined in. Grace felt tears sting her eyes. She hugged Maggie tightly, then turned to Dr. Briggs, who was smiling through the ash smudges on his face. As cleanup began, Grace, Maggie, and David Wilson took Onyx to the field behind the clinic. The stallion rolled in the grass, stretching out under the sun, his old scars and new wounds both visible. A survivor, a testament to everything they'd endured. Later, as night fell and lanterns glowed in the windows, Lucas gathered everyone for a statement. "The FBI has shut down a major horse theft ring today. Without the courage of Grace Whitman, Maggie Harper, and all of you, this wouldn't have been possible. Clearwater Creek has a new chapter ahead." Grace looked out at the faces, tough, tired, but alive with something she hadn't seen in a long time. Unity. For the first time since losing her ranch, she felt she belonged. Maggie squeezed her hand, Onyx grazing nearby, and whispered, "We did it. We really did it." Grace smiled, her heart light. "Yes, we did." And somewhere, in the hush of the prairie night, hope burned brighter than any fire. Clearwater Creek awoke to sunlight filtered through clean, blue skies. No more smoke, no more sirens, just the gentle promise of a new day. The town moved differently now, quieter but with an undercurrent of something like pride. For the first time in years, people met each other's eyes, The weight of Redmond's threats was gone, replaced by the lighter burden of rebuilding. Together. The clinic bustled with new life. Volunteers arrived before sunrise to help repair the scorched storage room and repaint the barn doors. Old rivalries faded as neighbors hammered nails side by side, laughter echoing between the stalls. Dr. Briggs shook hands with townsfolk he'd barely spoken to in years. Even the mayor rolled up his sleeves to sweep up debris, pausing often to pat Onyx's neck and thank Grace. David Wilson spent his mornings at the clinic with his son, grateful beyond words. He approached Grace one afternoon while Onyx grazed in the pasture, scars and all, the stallion's coat shimmering in the sun. "I meant what I said, Grace. If you ever want a place on my ranch, it's yours. I need someone who cares about horses and people the way you do." Grace hesitated, memories of her lost home rising and falling like waves. She glanced at Maggie, who stood nearby, laughing as she braided flowers into Onyx's mane. Something inside Grace softened. "I'd be honored, David. But only if Maggie can come too. She's got a knack with horses, and she deserves a chance." David smiled, nodding. "She's welcome always." Maggie's home life hadn't miraculously healed. Her father was still struggling, but now the town kept a gentle watch, and Maggie spent most days at the clinic, learning everything Grace and Dr. Briggs could teach. The girl's confidence blossomed, her laughter ringing out as she helped with feedings, cleaned stalls, and led Onyx on gentle walks along the creek. Grace found herself drawn out of old habits. She started training again, first with Onyx, then with the scrappy herd of rescues that trickled in as word of her skills spread. Children who'd been afraid of horses lined up for lessons, while old cowboys nodded approval as she coaxed even the most stubborn broncs into trusting her touch. She worked long days, but felt a satisfaction she'd thought she'd lost forever. The clinic, once a quiet outpost, became the heart of the community. People brought pies and casseroles. Kids painted murals on the repaired barn. Even the sheriff, with a new sense of humility, stopped by to help mend fences. No one mentioned Redmond or the fear he'd spread. Instead, they spoke of second chances, hard-won justice, and the hope that grows in scorched earth. Onyx's transformation was the talk of the town. His coat regained its shine, his eyes their intelligence. He still bore scars, physical and otherwise, but now he stood tall, no longer flinching at shadows. Grace rode him out every morning across the mesa, Maggie jogging alongside, the wind lifting their hair and spirits. One evening, David hosted a small celebration at his ranch. The whole town turned out. Old folks in folding chairs, children chasing each other under the cottonwoods, everyone bringing food, stories, and laughter. Lucas Rivera arrived with his badge tucked away and a rare, easy smile on his face. Bill Turner grinned at the sight of so many neighbors unafraid. A hush fell as Grace led Onyx into the clearing, Maggie at her side. David stood up, raising his glass. To Grace Whitman, to Maggie Harper, to Dr. Briggs and everyone who remembered what it means to do the right thing, even when it's hard. The crowd cheered, the sound swelling and echoing into the night. Grace blushed, tears shining in her eyes, Maggie hugging her fiercely. Later, as dusk deepened and the stars blinked awake, Grace slipped away for a moment, leading Onyx up to the edge of the mesa. Maggie followed, breathless and wide-eyed at the view. The land stretched out before them, fields silvered with moonlight, fences mended, the town glowing soft and golden below. "You think we'll be okay?" Maggie asked, voice small but hopeful. Grace looked at her, then at Onyx, who nuzzled her shoulder, gentle and strong. I do. We're not the same as we were, but that's okay. We survived. We changed. And we're together. Maggie smiled, her eyes shining. I want to help other horses, and kids like me. Maybe we could, build something new. Grace nodded, her heart swelling. That's the plan, one day at a time. They stood in silence, listening to the wind in the grass, the night alive with crickets and distant laughter. Down below, the town carried on, stronger now, bound by the trials they'd weathered together. As the moon climbed higher, Grace swung into the saddle, helping Maggie up behind her. Onyx snorted, then set off at an easy pace, hooves drumming a steady rhythm across the open mesa. The world felt wide and full of possibility. For the first time in a long while, Grace was not haunted by what she'd lost, but filled with hope for all that lay ahead. Clearwater Creek was still scarred, still healing. But where the old wounds had burned, new roots took hold. Friendship, courage, the belief that even in the ashes, something beautiful can grow. And as Grace, Maggie, and Onyx rode into the shimmering distance, their laughter carried on the wind, a promise that hope, once found, would never be lost again.